diversity and the pipeline for talent. And so, what's the deal? Why don't we see more diversity in IT? So, let's just have a discussion, right? You want to open it up and start with a question, and then we can get the dialogue going? Yeah.
You mentioned graduates. What's a graduate from your program? What is the capabilities? How long does it take? All of that.
Sure. So we're a 4-month boot camp. We call that our internship. We actually started in 2000, so we're kind of the original IT boot camp in Chicago. Our cohort is 20 people, and it's project-based learning environment. So we work with the corporate sector. They sponsor a project for us. So we take the 20 folks, they divide into 4 teams, they form their own consulting companies, and they're literally competing for an RFP with one of our corporate sponsors. So a good example is Kraft. They sponsored a project where they wanted to look at childhood obesity. And so the 4 teams kind of each came up with a mobile app idea. The team that won wanted to create an app that was called Lunch Lady Madness, and the lunch lady would be chasing you, and if you ate the wrong foods it would slow you down, but if you ate the right foods you'd be able to get away from her. And so that was the winning one, and then on the second sprint they all come together and do the design, so they study design thinking and all of those things, and do customer interviews. They talk to lots of kids. What would you play? And then the third sprint is all heads down building it. So they're learning the programming languages that in the platform from the market, right? So, this current cycle is working with TTX, and so that was on .NET. This was more of a Ruby project. So it's market-facing skills. And so when they leave, after 4 months, they've got 1,000 hours of real project work experience, database programming, analysis, and we provide them with their first 1,000 hours. And then they're going into roles as programmers or database or business analysts.
Okay. Is there any other question?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
For all of you, this is the question. Scalability and sustainability are, it seems to me, one of the problems that faces both companies and community organizations. I see obviously a lot of opportunity in what you're doing being replicated. What are your thoughts about scalability and sustainability of what you're doing? What's your vision of taking this beyond where it is today? And, when are you bringing it to South Shore and all regression specifically? But we can talk about that later.
Sure, I'll go first because Emile's got a great story. For us, it's all about, we're not training folks for jobs that don't exist. So, we train 3 cycles a year of 20. So we're relatively small. But we can shore up another training program if an employer comes to us and says, okay, we want to hire 20 QA folks. And that's sort of how the model works. Our placement rates are high because, we have in-depth relationships with our employers. We also have our own social enterprise where we do staff log, social media management, and we're starting a new social enterprise around Salesforce consulting for nonprofits. So we hire our graduates back and then put them to work, and this is over a 2-year period. But I think, and this is why this is so relevant for this conversation today, there is a shortage of technology workers in our region, across the nation, and there's a real need for people who can problem solve, who understand data, who can analyze data, and who can really get in there and use technology to solve business problems. The challenge is that they're not looking at the inner city and our communities as a solution to that problem. And so if our companies are only recruiting from the top 5 schools in computer science across the nation, then we're going to continue to have this problem. And so I think it's not, certainly we want to serve more people, but I think it's a whole solution where the employers, the training programs, the boot camps, and the schools all have to look at this from a 360-degree perspective. So we don't want to scale up and find that we're just training people that don't have jobs. We want to be able to scale up as a community, and that includes the business sector, the education sector, and the workforce development groups.
So I know for us, we just finished our first cohort with 90 students to do a workforce development program. So for us, it was a pilot, gave us a chance to really see, is this something we can scale up? I love IC Stars. I think they're an amazing organization. I can't say that enough. Every time I go somewhere, I'm like, IC Stars is a great model.
We love them too.
We follow a lot of what they do in many ways. So what we did with our 90 students is we took it in 3 different phases. The first phase is kind of this immersion in just HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery. Let's just see how much we can push on them. And I think to echo Sandy's point, these kids are so talented, and they are a major source, I think, to be able to fill in these gaps within these organizations. And there's so much demand. Well, let's look at our youth. Let's look at our communities as an opportunity for that. So that's kind of the premise where we went into it. So the first phase, they just learned all this stuff. But we also set them up with like GitHub accounts and all these other things that are important so that they can start developing a digital portfolio. So they create a website pretty much that also has links to their digital portfolio, so people can click on it, link on it, and so they can take that moving forward. And we kind of call it workforce development because we want to make sure that they understand that there's an expectation that you're going to spend a lot of time on this. We're going to be serious about it, and we really want this to be something that hopefully we can scale up in a real intentional way. So the second phase, they're pretty much working on these targeted projects, everything from a data project, taking like creating a simple CTA app and really being able to work with the data portal. Another thing that they do is they work on a quick game that we can actually, we create most of the framework, but they are able to walk through the logic, the skill sets, and all the other things to make that happen. And then, they create this website to show the digital portfolio. But the third step for us is really creating these websites and apps for small businesses and nonprofit organizations. We get a lot of people that come to us and say, hey, we need a website done, we need an app done. There's, if you go to any meetup here in Chicago, if you're the technical developer, you have 50 people trying to push an app on you. So we say, we want to create this kind of army of folks that can in fact do that. So we have another 130 students that are going to be starting next month, and it's a crazy experience, but I think overall we want to make sure that, hey, if those 10-15% of students are super excited about this, want to continue building and want to continue being involved with us, that we really can start having that capacity building, because we feel as if there's just so many different organizations that want these websites and apps in fact built. So we're opening up another center in the Inglewood community to really address that because of the lack of jobs and opportunities, especially for this 18 to 24-year-old demographic. So it's important for us to try to see, all right, how can we take the best of what we do, what we want to see in the tech community, the kind of skill training and intentional processes to see if is this scalable? Because once again, my goal is to get to 1,000 people that we can work with, and whether we get there, I don't know, but that's my goal, because I feel as if, hey, if that 15% that's really excited about tech, that really want to continue going, we can start developing those projects and working with the Chicago Department of Public Health to solve problems with what they're in fact doing. So we feel as if we can add a layer onto what Chicago wants to do to make it a better place and have folks that are from the community that are addressing those problems.
Yeah, from my perspective, I don't have students. I'm very glad that they are developing that. For as a business owner, we need that people. We need qualified people to be able to solve problems. I find out myself so many times, trying to find the right people for the right project. And sometimes there is amazing resumes, but at the time that they need to be, solving the problem is not solved for me. So I think we really need to encourage our generations to think and solve all the different problems that small businesses and other businesses has, because many times in the past, what I find out, I started my business when this crisis, before 2008, in IT, the common thing, it was like, oh, the server doesn't work, or the computer doesn't work, just, put it in the trash and purchase another one. Now it's not the case. The market changed. So we need people who think how to solve and fix things. How can we make things more efficient with the limited resources that small businesses has? So I think that's one of the very important parts, so we can be able to, scale and be able to grow as small businesses. And also something that is happening in the market is that the majority of the businesses, of course, are small businesses, but they need, someone who can know about different things. It's not only programming or a website, but we also, people who do tech support, people who can support the networks. And sometimes it is very, very complicated to find someone who can do all the different things and can be that versatile. Usually for Fortune 500, they specialize in just one single thing. And that's how IT is becoming. It's becoming kind of like doctors. I mean, I specialize in server, 2003, and another person in 2010, and you have clients that you have to serve all different kind of servers, but you don't have enough work to have to all that people. So as a small business, you need to be very creative to have the resources out there and the connections to depend on the project that you have, you can pull that person. So that's a way that I found out it will be sustainable and scalable. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult.
Great.
I see a lot of diversity in the tech. I've been in it 35 years, and I see a lot of diversity. It does siphon off, and of course, I saw a lot of diversity this last month ago in one room. And we call that diversity, but then, and we target Inglewood so much. And everybody who wants money targets Inglewood. They'll just throw out the word Inglewood, and they think people are going to throw money at it. What about, the Inglewood is not the only place that diverse groups of people live. There are communities on the north side that are 50% Hispanic. And yet no one is serving that area with these programs. And so my question is,
Yeah.
What are the metrics for diversity, and what are the metrics? You talked about the companies wanting to hire only from the top 5 schools. What are the metrics that you'll use to build on what your organizations do to present an employer with the capabilities they need?
Yeah, I guess to answer that directly, we targeted Inglewood because of the high unemployment rate. It's about 85% when you talk about an 18 to 24-year-old. So there might be other programs, and it takes an army of programs to really fix a problem as significant as that. And there's a lot of communities, I think, that need programs. I think every community needs programs. We kind of had to go where we're getting the most support. But at the same time, we felt as if a lot of the students that are part of our program came from that community or are very close. So when we looked at kind of what location made sense for our next move, we had to go where, one, most of our students and our applications were coming from, and also had to go where I think that it provided a better regional support for what it is that we wanted to do. But there's a lot of communities that need training, and I think if it was up to the Fortune 500, everybody would be training for them, so that would depress, their wages just a little bit. But there's a lot of problems, I think, in terms of providing diversity. If we take a look at the Google numbers, the Facebook numbers, LinkedIn, so on and so forth, you might have some that work in these different companies, even though it's like 2% for African American, pretty much all across the board. The ones that are actually involved with the coding and making the decisions and all these other things still don't have that representation. And there's a lot of great organizations that are trying to attack this problem, and I think there should still be more. But I think if you take a look at even the amount of the funding landscape for these organizations, it's not that big. I think it should be bigger. Because we take a look at Bethel New Life that does great work. they do amazing work, and they're doing some of the things that we're doing, and we want to work with them on some of the things that they're doing.
Thank you for saying that.
You know, there's a lot of organizations, but at the same time, the pie is really not represented in terms of the amount of funding that is really necessary and intentional funding for, I think, the programs that are needed. I think for us, you know, it was important for us to get them on GitHub accounts as if they were on the north side or they were on some more affluent areas. So we looked to see what were they doing in more affluent areas and said, all right, let's make sure that the community is represented. And although you were at our place for an entire month and you saw a lot of diversity, that it doesn't happen anywhere with that, pretty much within the country for that matter. I mean, so I like to think what we're doing is different and interesting, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
And the metrics for these companies that want to hire people?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that we look at for our own metrics is we take a look at the number of hours of digital training. We take a look at the number of projects, in fact, completed, the number of hours per project that they're actually assigned. We take a look at some of the other components of the proficiency in the languages. So they take a pre-test and post-test so we can see just how far they've progressed. Have we had a substantial effect? But also, you know, when we take a look at placement in jobs and other projects as a result of that, that's important for us because we've had 3 students since our demo day last week that have been offered additional projects to be worked on with money, which is important. We've also had some that have been accepted to some of the other boot camps here in Chicago that I won't mention. So we've had some other good things that have come from that, and I think we're just excited to see kind of how that scales up.
Time will tell, right?
Yeah.
Just for the notes, what organization were you mentioning? I didn't catch the name.
Which one?
Bethel?
Bethel New Life. Yes.
If you want to talk to me, I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there is a lot of population who needs representation. The Hispanic population that I represent, you know, it is a very strong population, and unfortunately, it is very sad to see that we are not getting into technology as we should. As I'm mentioning, I'm one of the very few Latinas who are in IT or who owns an IT company. I know another 2, and just because I'm in the in the area, there is not a lot of the motivation for Hispanics to go into IT. It's not there. I happened to be a judge in one fair in UIC, and I was shocked that from all the students, the majority was people from India, some Chinese. There was the only Hispanic in there was myself, and I'm here seeing the same. I don't know if there is any other Hispanic. So we really need more. Okay, another one. Yeah. And it's a woman, so that's a good thing. But we need to be more inclusive. I think one of the things that we need to change, and how can we attract more young people, the millennials, is to change the stereotype of an IT person. Because an IT person usually it's a man, usually it's a geek, or the hacker person. But IT is much more than just programming. IT, it's the people who is doing the networks. People say, oh, I'm a people person, I don't want to be on the desk programming. You don't have to be on the desk programming. You can be out there talking with a client and creating solutions for that. I think IT is for everybody nowadays, because in the past it was a tool. Now it's the core. It's the backbone of all the businesses. Every single business, as long as you have your computer, you have a cell phone, you have your tablet, you need an IT person. Now everybody needs someone. In the past, you need to have a lawyer, you need to have a doctor, and an accountant. Now you need to have an IT on your side. Otherwise, you cannot operate. We need to be more inclusive in ethnicities, in people, in women, and also, I mean, for my background, I didn't study IT. I studied international business. I have a minor in marketing and a master's in innovation and business development. But I do all the business side of IT, and I became that gap between the IT guy and the business people. Because we need that kind of people too. People who can understand, how business runs and how the IT person works. A programmer can do amazing programs, but if you don't, give him the resources, the right problem, how to program those things, he's going to create something, but it may work, it may not work. We're talking about data. There is tons of data, but if you don't ask the right question, then you're not going to receive the right answer. So I think that's one of the gaps that you need to get. Bring more diverse people, more business people into the IT world. Because sometimes, I think it's also matter of perspective too. It's not very glamorous sometimes. You know, the IT is, we need to educate kids from the very beginning when they are, you know, in the elementary school or maybe at early childhood education. You know, be in technology, be a scientist, it's fun, it's cool. Because if we don't do that, they come to high school, and the geek is not the coolest person in the world. So you want to fit in. You don't want to be an outsider. So we need to change that perspective, that mentality, so then we can have more people, you know, come into IT and diverse, you know, careers. That's what we need right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree completely. And to what Emile said earlier about, you know, building games and apps, it's about sort of shifting that paradigm from being, you know, consumers of technology to being makers, to being the innovators. And I think that's the thing. I mean, you know, everybody wants to, you know, have power, right? And when we shift from being a consumer to being the innovator or the maker, I mean, that's power. And I think that that's something to really sell to young people and so on. I mean, but it starts with, if we can't see it, how do you be it? And that's why it's so important that, you know, Blue is in Pilsen and is starting in Inglewood. To be visible in the community allows us to aspire to something that we haven't necessarily seen before. And that's why it's absolutely critical that we are on the south side and the west side, and that we are representing and having a space for people to be. Like, the truth is that, you know, a lot of our parents were not programmers. They were not MIS folks. And so, you know, technology is everywhere, but it's also disguised and in many ways invisible. And so if our only PC is our phone, you know, how do we set up these places, these awesome spaces that sort of show us the breadth and depth of technology and how cool it is?
And one other thing I was going to say, I know some other questions, but we received 750 applications in 10 days for our program. And I think it's indicative of the fact that folks want to do it. They want to do technology, but at the same time, we were actually showing them a little money on the end of the day, too. So they're making a little money per hour. And it gave a nice combination for that. There's just not that many opportunities for someone to learn, to build, to make stuff, and being seen money at the end of the day, or see that there's some sort of ROI for my kind of personal investment into the technology.
There's a question over there, yeah.
Where do you see the A+ certification, and do your programs offer it? Do you see that the trend is to, for your clients then to achieve that A+ certification or not?
Well, I'll just say for our program, we do provide A+ certification training. We do it for two reasons. One, it's good to have a certification, which appeases a lot of bases that may not understand technology. But we also do it because maybe some of the students realize they like the hardware side of the equation more, and that's their kind of way to get into tech. Because for most of the folks that are advisors or people that we look up to, and we bring them in and we talk to them why they got involved in technology, many of them say, because I was pulling my computer apart, putting it together, I was seeing what was happening, and I just started to get interested in that. So we wanted those kind of sparks to take place as well, because not everyone's going to be a programmer, to her point. So now that everyone wants to do that. We need hardware people too, we need networking people too. So we just said, for our program, let's expose you to a lot of stuff, and hopefully one thing turns the light bulb on, and then you want to continue to go along that path as well.
Yes.
So I'm also running a program in Humboldt Park, and
Oh, yeah.
I know that one of the issues that I've faced in trying to keep youth engaged and also keep our funding and that kind of thing is also around support services. And I think being from an organization that does that, it's a lot easier for us to kind of allow for us to better support the larger elements of what's going on in youth's lives, especially as we deal with high-risk youth or youth in the neighborhoods that we have with such high stress and things that are going on in their lives. So what things do you guys provide to kind of allow for that extra support for youth? And I think that raises the larger issue that many of you guys kind of touched on around why there aren't youth from our communities in spaces that end up with being decision makers or being at the top 5 schools. It's around like, well, those aren't my priorities, right? My priority right now is taking care of my family. My priority is making sure I can still eat. My priority is, making sure I don't get shot. So how do we allow for support so that they can get to that place of, being in a position where you can see, 60%, people of color, women, etc., in rooms that are schools that we typically never see anyone at.
Would that be diversity, 60%? What would be the metrics on diversity?
I'm just saying it should be a bigger number.
Bigger
60%
number.
would be awesome.
Are there metrics on diversity?
Well, let's get back to this question because I think it's a very important one. I think the idea of, and you're absolutely right, by being an agency, you have the infrastructure to build that support. We're talking about an industry that is intense, it is competitive, it is, long days, right? Like when you're in the business of solving problems and building solutions, there's no 5 o'clock, right? And then Laura can say, like, people don't just clock out, right? And I often say, like, from the neck down, we're all minimum wage, right? It's what we do with what's up here that makes us knowledge workers. Well, the truth is that many times the things that take us off our tracks are life. And when we are coming from a degree of privilege, a lot of those things are taken care of. And in fact, we don't even have to think about the things that would take somebody else off their track. And so as social service agencies, one of the amazing gifts in that infrastructure is thinking through the whole person who's coming from a place of a different kind of privilege. And so, we have to provide things like counseling services. We have to think about transportation. We have to think about childcare. We have to think about all the things that would prevent somebody from not only signing up, but completing, finishing, and feeling like they have the support that they need. So one of the most challenging things in our world is that in 4 months, 12 hours a day, it is really hard to sort of believe that I am an IT person after all this, even though it's been intense, there's been tears and everything else. And so I go to my interview and, I can pass all the technical aptitude tests, but I still can't represent that absolute confidence because it's so new. And so thinking through some of the deeper issues around what prevents us from coming to the front of the line and saying an I am, because we have been told so many times what we are not. And I think that's why these partnerships with organizations like yours are so critical, because it's answering the what I am versus what society tells you we are not.
And adding to that, I think those are amazing points. What we try to do with our space is actually have people that look like them actually building this stuff, that are adults that they can look up to. And whether they recognize it or they say it, they listen to the conversations that the other people have. And I remember Damon Drummer, who runs Inglewood Codes, and they built their program out of our space this summer as well. And one of the things that he mentioned to me, that one of the kids heard one of the adults talking about JavaScript. And he's like, oh, that's what I'm learning right now. And being able to have those kind of connections and those moments are important. So it's not just, well, I'm learning something that's so new and different and strange, and how am I going to ever apply it? Whoever uses it, what am I going to use it for? And being able to see that and see those representations. For a lot of folks, the first time they've ever seen a female engineer was at our space, which is important. The first time they've ever seen someone who was over 60 who was still working on technology happens at our space. And those kind of moments are just important. And it sounds, it's funny, but some of the comments afterwards. Hey, that was really cool. I saw this person who's still working on this, and they're retired. So those things are really important, I think, and really feeling as if you belong and you're part of something that's really intentional. And I think what we try to do as well is try to raise the bar and expectation for them that this is serious. This is not after school program. You can still have fun and be relaxed and not be in an intense environment, but still have high expectations. And I think with even our demo day that we had last week, it was just amazing to see how they've really developed over the summer. They're creating iBeacon apps. They've created, NFC stuff and all this other stuff that you would think would only be found in certain areas of Chicago. And by being able to tell those stories and being able to show them and being able to send out links to the games and everything, they really start to see themselves it contextualizes in a completely different way.
Yes, here's a question back here.
Yeah, I work at the planetarium, and we've been having a big push lately on community-based team programs with technology, and also integrating STEM mentors for teams. And I was just wondering if I know you all work with older age groups, but I was curious if you do any sort of mentoring, and what results you get from that, and what sort of techniques you encourage mentors to use.
Yeah.
To keep attrition rates down.
Yeah, great question. So, and kudos to you guys. You've always been on the side of developing youth in STEM stuff, and I love the planetarium. We've had a couple alums who have worked there too. But I think one of the most powerful mentoring relationships are near peer. And so, our graduates in their 20s make phenomenal mentors to teens. Because, it's not like some old lady like me coming in and being like, technology is great. But they, kind of make geek chic again, right? And so that's very powerful to begin with. There's also, the best mentors are the ones who can see us for who we are and for who we can be. And so they really represent that. And so, it's we do... At IC Stars, we do this model called The Voice. So like the TV show where they all turn around in their seats. So everybody does a 2-minute pitch this is who I am, this is why I'm great, and this is the kind of mentor I'm looking for. And then when the mentor turns around, then they make a match. But the coolest thing is, so if it was the three of us and we all turned around, then we have to fight, pick me as your mentor. No, pick me. And Emile would be like, no, I'm cooler than SANDEE any day.
I would never say that.
So I think that the secret to great mentoring is that there's reciprocity in it. If I'm coming to the table to just help, and not to learn, if I'm only a teacher and not a learner, it's a one-sided thing and it's charitable. And that kind of stops at pizza and basketball on Saturdays. But if there's reciprocity in it, in that as a young person, I'm also going to inspire you and spark that passion and remind you of why you got into this in the first place, and that there's reciprocity in that relationship, those mentorship relationships last for years, decades.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm involved in a Vex Robotics Club in Oak Park, and it's very well funded with foundation money, local foundation money. There's tons of these engineering parents that come out. It's just so well supported. And then right across the street in Austin is pretty much nothing. I've seen we had one Vex club that started and then it stopped again. Parts were getting stolen. It was really hard to manage. Kids weren't always interested. There's just lots of barriers. And I'm just wondering, from all the ingredients that I'm hearing you all say, from business partners that are willing to invest in your program, or I'm assuming yours is Blue is founded foundation money.
Yeah, a little bit of everything, a little
bit of
grassroots.
everything. And then you've also got you've got expertise. You've got people who have an interest in running these programs and either are paid or volunteers. You've got mentors. You've got wraparound support service. All the things that it takes to do this in a more of an inner city context. Which of those ingredients are the things that, and then you need kids too that are interested in this. Which are the things you feel like you we've got, like the kids, are the kids there, or is the money there? And then which are things that are lacking that we as a community need to work on? I'm just wondering about what's the gap? Why does this stuff take off?
Yeah, and I'll speak, and I'm pretty passionate about this, so I'll try to temper that a bit.
Let it fly, Emile.
No, not on the live stream. No, jokes aside, I think the biggest thing is it needs a whole ecosystem, and that's what makes it so challenging. I think for us at first it was the space, to be able to say this is an intentional space with this certain purpose, with these certain partners, so that we can bring in the NSBs and other organizations and great folks and the IC stars. We can feel like we're a safe landing space for someone to be able to do that. And that was the first thing that I think we were trying to solve, is just a space that they can believe that the good things happen. The second thing that you absolutely need is there's got to be some sort of mentorship component that we talked about. But what I don't see as much is like this funding infrastructure, which is the most disappointing part. I think you take a look at kind of what's being funded and what's getting jobs, and it's a little disjointed right now. And I think that there's that disconnect is making it difficult for great programs like the Bethels, IC Stars, and us to be able to continue to scale those things forward. Because I think there's still this idea in Chicago, and this is just my opinion, where there's this kind of innovative class, innovative communities where they're solving problems that someone else in other communities can't solve. And I think that that's difficult, because then when you're trying to fund these different opportunities in robotics and other things, you have to show, there has to be that kind of flash that goes along with it. I think, in many communities we can celebrate the Jackie Robinsons, West baseball players really well. There's more support and infrastructure that's now being put into place, and where's a Jackie Robinson for the community that we really in fact need, that's going to inspire that generation of students to want to get involved? Because I think if you take a look at the numbers of how many have started to enroll in Jackie Robinson baseball as a result of all that visibility, it's gone up substantially, right? So we need to have those contests, those competitions, those ways of showing the students that you can feel great about what it is that you do. And I think for an Oak Park, my girlfriend's an officer at Oak Park, so she sees the difference between Oak Park and Austin. So you can see kind of that big barrier, and there's a lot of infrastructure, ecosystem, and support systems in place, and funding in place. But you look at Austin, there's, trying to figure out how to really do it and scale it up so it can feel as great.
One of my things is money enough? If somehow magically money came along, do you think all these other components, or some of those components, missing too?
I think that it. I think if more money was involved that connected to real life jobs opportunities, that would make it happen. I don't think it's, because I think that you still have this kind of after school component that's still seen with tech programs, to me, in the inner city, as opposed to the IC Stars way of saying, hey, this is going to get you a job. We're preparing you for a job. And so when folks go into IC Stars, they know, hey, I'm doing a program. I'm, getting a little bit of money. I'm helping my family out a bit, but I'm also know that this is preparing me for the next level. And I don't see as much of preparing for the next level. It's more so, let's just get them around the computer for an hour and see if, our computers stay there afterwards.
Yeah.
To me, just to add on to what you were saying, I think the reason why IC Stars can be successful like that is that they've thought through the sustainability of that track of bringing somebody on and then looking at where that person actually ends up at the end. And I think that putting money, like just saying like, what if all automatically you had money, like for the perspective of my organization, like in Humboldt Park, we similar. I think we got the same grant with Blue 1647 with our summer youth employment program, and yeah, there's a massive amount of youth that want to be employed, that want to have this kind of experience, and want to invest in their employability, but the way that organizations, the way that we get money is just like, here's a bunch of money, and then it's going to get cut off. Exactly. So you're not going to have money after this. So whatever you do right now is as much as you can do right now, but there's no ability for us to be in a space where it's sustainable, so that we can say, and yes, we'll be able to get, having connections with employers that'll say, yes, if you go through this program, we will make sure that there's a connection that you can be hired or move forward in that process after you're able to go through this program. The building of that process, I think IC STARS has been really successful in building that. And in order for organizations to have the capacity to build that and to keep it sustainable, I think that's where funders' mindsets need to be. It can't just be, oh, we're gonna fund money for youth to have something to do in the summer,
Right.
so that they don't get killed and
Right.
they're gonna get experience, which we do give them. But then it's like, well, after that, be free, and we have, we hope we hope you were successful in the summer. But not thinking about the longer term of what does this mean for the youth that are in these programs. All of my youth at the end of my program, I have 2 of them here, yay, so you guys can also direct experience, ask them how it went. A lot of them have asked, okay, now what do I do? And mine is a pilot project, it's not like as established as 47. But having to try and answer that question of like, what do we do now? Like, where do we go from here? And I'm trying to let's figure it out together, but that's like a one-on-one, that takes a lot to just try and establish what are those next steps. And I think that when we have sustainable solutions for that, then we can, that's when you have a real ecosystem that supports all of the youth that want to be getting to a place where they're employed and see themselves as like, this is where I'm going, this is where my job is going to be now.
Do you see schools as a possible place to?
Somewhat, but that's
They're
cutting out a
sustainably
very
funded.
big percentage of youth that have dropped out or that don't see school as a viable ability for them to get to where they need to go. We also have a huge gap of youth that have graduated but didn't get into college because of those larger barriers of I gotta take care of my family. How do I go to school and take care of my family? And if you're not gonna pay me, or if I'm not gonna have a sustainable way to fund myself and go through your program, then I have to choose money, because that's the survival of my family. And those are all the issues that come up. So then when you're looking at those, even just looking at them in your mind, it's like, no, that's too much to deal with. And I think that's what keeps a lot of our youth from moving forward.
Well said.
But I think also that we have to acknowledge the school piece in the sense that, and I mentor to lots of small children. We go out and do career day, and they all stand up and talk about what they want to be, and no one says anything closely related to the technology. You know what I mean? And so we got superheroes, sports, personalities, all these other stuff, but no one says anything about technology. And if that seed is not planted at the beginning, where you can say, you too can be this type of person, you too can work in technology in this field. If we don't have that representation at the school level, maybe some of those kids that dropped out because they weren't interested, they had nothing that was capturing their attention, maybe they would have stayed, because now we have something that is really aligned well, starting with primary school and then moving beyond. And again, we know that there are going to be children, for whatever reason, that will not stay in school. And we have some pretty strong programming across the city that addresses that. There's a catchment for them to do some really, really cool things. But I just think that we need to start that seed planting earlier. We need to have the Microsofts do things other than come and drop off computers to computer labs. There are plenty of people who make up the Microsoft Corporation and many of the other technology firms that do a myriad of different things, and they can start with the small kids, elementary kids into high school. I just think that we just need to blow it all up and start over again, and someone really needs to be for real about it, which is why I wanted you to be for real about EMILE on camera, because someone used to have the courage to say, this is not working, and we want to make it better, and how we need to make it better is this. It disheartens me that we don't have anyone from CPS that wanted to join this conversation, because I think that curriculum in our Chicago public school system has to be addressed as it pertains to technology. We can't continue to say that we have all of these technology jobs, all these companies, making these reports that we have 1,500 technology jobs, and we have no one to match them with, and then there's not any conversations from the end to the start. I think that that's just such a backwards way of doing business.
From an institutional point of view, the schools are different in Oak Park than they are in Chicago. In the communities that's right next to you, Austin, I'm in North Lawndale, they closed 50 of those things. The teachers are not the ones that control, the principals aren't the ones that control. And every year, and frankly, every quarter, there's a new something that they gotta do. The long term is your parents who are working at Microsoft, they can come to your schools and they can, and I'm for this, I wanna do this in our community. My parents don't work at Microsoft. My parents don't have the capability to say to the schools and to the people that really run the schools, we're gonna do something long term, but that's what we're gonna have to do. The ecosystem idea of EMILE is really the key. The ecosystem in Chicago is so erratic in these communities on all levels. You know, whether it's walking down the street, whether it's going to school, those things are not, as Kyla said, all contributing to the end goal of producing a better life and a better community. And we've got to fight that. That's why I raised the issue in the earlier session about politics. Politics is supposed to be where we're having this discussion, and what politics now, nationally, not just locally, is about is electing people. And that's not what politics is about. It's supposed to be designing society and how we talk about that. So I think part of this is we've got to find a way, and again, I agree, we've got to find a way to make these schools do what they're supposed to be doing. And just saying the parents ought to is not the way. The elected officials ought to, is they're the ones that, you know, change every month whatever the priorities are in our schools.
Well, here's a question back to
So-
the School of Chicago. Sorry. I was just gonna ask, is School of Chicago keyed in to this issue? Frankly, I mean, for all the interest in open data, I think this issue we're talking about here and this ecosystem you're talking about is probably more important than open data. That's just my opinion.
Well, and it's all connected.
Second.
You know.
I just kind of wanted to jump in real fast and say something. So there is right now, the ECSS schools, there's 5 schools around the city of Chicago.
Out of 600.
Right, but you know, it's a start, and there's, you know, 5 corporations involved, you know, Verizon, CompTIA, IBM. I've actually been on the project for 10 weeks, so I'm just getting started learning the jargon and lingo. But there is a meaningful conversation in the works, and you know, it's not there yet, but the corporations are getting involved in a more meaningful way. And you know, for me, I work with Lindy, and we're trying to bridge that gap. So seeing what the community actually needs, getting out in the community and making it a very iterative process. So it definitely is not there yet, but I do see some very positive change in the works. And really, to me, what I've seen is it is about exposure. So as we bring these near peers into the classroom and they get that model. I was on the elevator going up to our offices, and we had brought this forget the name of the college, it's Syndiosocial. And we had brought Syndiosocial into the classroom, and there was one of the programmers, he was shy, he didn't want to speak, but he was really relatable once he would open up. And the kids just loved him. And I'm riding up the elevator, and one of the kids was like, I saw myself in that kid. And it's providing that, you know, that model really changes things. So getting back to the point of, you know, the corporations aren't involved, the schools aren't involved, it's a work in progress, and it's, you know, it's beginning. And so to say that, I see a lot of like.
Can I just address that particular piece?
Sure.
And then I'll allow you to finish. If the Chicago public school system can change the school day to this particular school system day, split up the schools, change the schools, rearrange the schools, put everybody back on the same schedule, go on strike, get off of strike, there's power in the organization. And I acknowledge the work, and I
Sure.
will talk with you afterwards. I would love to have you be part of this task force going forward.
Right.
I just cannot accept from a logical person's perspective that you, who make decisions, we're talking about CPS, makes decisions, and you can't put some of that decision making to address the entire population of schools that you're responsible for. And that's not for you to have to take the
No,
burden
so
of
just to finish the
responsibility.
thought, I think
Yeah.
that, when you're dealing with a 5x5 matrix, you have 5 organizations, 5 schools, you have a lot of different stakeholders, you have parents. It's really hard to establish that common dialogue that's needed to move forward. So I think we're talking about end results, but I'm glad to see that the pendulum is moving. It might be moving slowly and inefficiently, but it's moving. So I just wanted to put that out there because there is traction on that, so.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm listening to the conversation and I hear a lot of underserved communities that want to kind of come into this, the mainstream when there's a lot of more issues that's going on that should be solved by the people in the community themselves. So if you're an organization and you're saying, hey, let me in, give my people these jobs, when there's already issues that need to be resolved that can create jobs in the community, I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to create that for our people, instead of saying, let me go to Microsoft, hire me. There's a lot of Microsoft work and need in the community. You can't even get high-speed internet in certain communities. We can solve those problems and have an economic system on our own to kind of develop, to give our own children jobs, instead of saying, hey, give them a job. We did all this work. We have to develop a sustainability by creating the jobs ourselves. And I don't hear that conversation as much as I hear, help us, give me some money. And that's not the conversation we need to have. We need to put down long-term goals that can give us jobs, that can teach them things. And then we can't always look for, I'm not saying a handout, I think you get the first round of money to get the plan that may last 10 years to get a community going. I seen a man in Inglewood, he came and started a non-for-profit coffee shop. And that coffee shop is providing sustainability, but it's also a non-for-profit that's having jobs for people in the community. And we have to start looking at those models. So when we do get the funding, we're building our community and solving problems, because the money is already there in your community. There's almost $1 trillion in the African American community itself. There's money. They're spending money sending it to Apple, but you can send the same money into the community to help your youth. And that's what we need to look at first and solve those problems before we start saying, give me more money. We don't need that.
You're absolutely right, and and it's a critical point, right? It's not until we develop our own business and generate wealth for the community that we can even begin to be at the table, right? And I think that what's interesting when I'm hearing about this whole conversation is that it's not just one single thing. It's not the parents, it's not the robots, right? It literally, the civic leaders, to your point, Brian, and the service leaders, the nonprofits, the community-based organizations, and the business leaders, and teaching entrepreneurship and developing businesses in our communities. And frankly, when we start to have conversations between all three groups, then I think we get to that idea of sustainability, because we're not doing things in a silo and saying, where are our people? I'm doing all this good work, but I'm not getting any support. It's nothing stops a bullet like a job, right? Well, nothing, it also takes a village to sort of rewrite the narrative of who we are, what we stand for, and the opportunities that are facing us.
But I see a lot of computers, and everyone almost have a computer in their home, but you don't see a place to do. If I want to get my computer fixed, I might have to go to Best Buy, somewhere else. Where is that computer shop that is owned by the community? I can just go take my computer down there and fix my computer and go home and get it for less, And it can be a non-for-profit, but it's still a business that's using the technology and still hiring people within that system. And we have to kind of source out the community to get everything.
Sure.
So we can have those things and develop those things.
Yeah, and we just have a partnership with 500 churches to do just that, to be a Geek Squad for the community. So those are some of the kind of social enterprises that we're building on top of that to give them more digital training. And I know for SANDEE, they talked about a social enterprise that they're building to provide outsourced services in some capacity. So I think, although the conversation talked about kind of some of one end, there's still, I think with all of these organizations, those solutions to be able to employ people, to be able to employ people within the community. And also for us, when we're building those websites for small businesses, nonprofits, and organizations, it's, hey, give our youth $500 as opposed to giving a web developer $1,500. And that creates that ecosystem internally. And I think with our incubator being an incubator as well, we have 50-something businesses that are there that are also service providers, that are also folks that we can create that circulation of the dollar within this internal community as well. So some of the things I think that our organizations represent are just those things, and we're not all the answers. We don't have all the answers, but I think that taking a look at these examples are some of the ways that we can start getting those dollars being, so people can have better choices.
And also, I think we need to motivate our people. I mean, it's great that we have students and they can have opportunities to have jobs or maybe not. But why we don't motivate people to be entrepreneurs? I started my business when I was studying. So I think more and more young people needs to be motivated to be entrepreneur, because it may not be, the job that you want, but if you don't have it or if you don't want certain things, you need to create your own opportunities. That's what you need to be educating your people, and that's something that it's part of your education. I mean, I think we need to be empower our kids to tell, you know what, you don't have to go and look for a job. You can do it yourself. You can create jobs. That it's how you can make a difference in your community. In my case, I am the small little shop that is helping other businesses with their computers. And they don't have to go Geek Squad. They are very happy with the services. So if they have a new problem, they know they can call me. We can go fix it, or they can bring it to the office. Whatever it is. I think that's part of the changing conversation. It's like technology is not only for big companies; it's for small businesses too, and that's the majority in the United States.
You had a question,
Yeah, so I just have a point. So I had Ford.us come to my office and do a lunch and learn this week, and they want to be like this civic tech organization, getting tech involved in like policy and politics. But their first priority is not educating people that need jobs and would love to have the education. Their first priority is more H-1B visas, because their assumption is that it's a very short-term goal, right? It's like, I need the people who are qualified now, as opposed to I want to build the people who will be qualified forever. And I think that needs to be a part of this conversation.
That sounds very similar to words I've heard from, I think, Bill Gates. Like, we don't have enough qualified Americans to do this stuff. And so we got to go overseas to get it done. And that's, I think it shortchanges the talent we have in this country, no question about that. So I agree with you. There are some major issues that we've got to deal with.
But it also recognizes that the world is, competing. Everybody's competing. In India, they built massive systems to train people to do certain things in tech. In other parts of the world, that's happening, and it's not happening here. We're not, because it's not like if you go to India or China even, that you're going to find somebody that has the same skills that if you went to Stanford or the best schools here. They're not teaching them to do that. They ultimately will teach them to do that, but they have taught them to do some very specific things that people want to buy. And I'm arguing that the point is, we can do some of that. If we invested in the stuff that these guys are doing on the scale that they're doing in India and China, and we believe that the people are available on the South and the West Side, we can have that, but that's also part of the market decision. I mean, and we've got to, somebody said we got to have this conversation with all of us at the table, because Bill Gates was a classmate of mine, by the way. Bill Gates, he can sit down and he can support future, support for this. But again, as this lady said, that's not the only place it comes from. It also comes from us employing our own money to create some of that infrastructure. So, but there is a world economy, and for us to simply act like we're not just competing against the guys in Northbrook now.
Yeah.
We're competing in the world.
Yeah, here's a point over here.
I have a question. What are your recommendations for the people who are hiring? Because obviously there's just like a lot of discrimination, and that's a huge factor in this also.
Yeah, it's funny because when I first got into this IT world in '98, I loved IT because it was creative, and it didn't matter what you looked like, and it was for the most part a meritocracy. Like, geeks don't care if it works; it's good, right? And for years we had 100% placement for our graduates. Because we had a network of CIOs, we'd call them up and say, we got this many developers, this many analysts, this many project management types, and it was done. The second recession hit, and we saw roadblocks come up in ways that we've never seen them before. And so the HR departments were now saying, first of all, I couldn't go to the CIO. It was, okay, you got to go through HR now. And then these processes, weeded out our folks because they required 5-10 years of experience in ridiculous things like Ruby that wasn't even around 10 years ago. But these were sort of blockades that we couldn't get past. And so my recommendation for hiring, folks who are hiring, is to really look at aptitude, but also attitude, motivation, and the ability to solve problems. So I think that the one thing that we have going for us is those of us who have overcome adversity have developed a resiliency toolkit that has critical thinking skills in it, creativity, chutzpah, reciprocity, whatever you want to call it. But that's an amazing asset. And we've gotten so used to this narrative is that we are needy, that we need things, versus we are like warriors. And because of coming through and overcoming adversity, we are experts at solving problems. And so back to your point of you're always looking for people to solve problems in new ways. And so to look at diversity as an incredible means to solve problems, that I believe after teaching technology for 15 years, that learning the technology is the easy part.
Yeah.
And
Actually,
so, yeah.
if I may, add to that. I mean, I as a small business, and I also, have other friends. One of them is a security officer in Coca-Cola in Atlanta. But I think for us as employers, it is really important that you have, the technology skills. That's fine, but personality skills are really important. There is things that we can teach you, and if you don't know it, it's okay. But if you are not in the mentality to be proactive, to solve the problem, to, be there and be loyal to the company. All those kind of things, you cannot teach that. I mean, it's part of your personality. If you have it, that's I think one of the most important things. We know, Fortune 500s in a small business, that other things are going to change. Like whatever you study in your school, at the end of the school, if there's a 4-year major, half of that is not. It's not going to work. Because the change is working so fast. But I think that personality skills, and also we need to change the idea that, okay, I don't have to be a people person, I just have to be with my computer. You need to be a people person, even if you're in IT, because you need to interact with the client. And that interaction is really important because the more connection you have with the people, the easier you can, they can understand you and you can create better solutions. Otherwise, we're going to, face the problems that we're having, that there is the IT people, we know everything, and the rest of the world, they are users, they don't know anything because we know everything. So no, we need a connection in that. So I think that is a very important thing that you need to bring when you have interviews. I have the skills, but also I'm a people person because that is going to separate you from the rest. I'm a problem solver. That's what we all want. We all have problems. We want someone, here's the problem, just solve it.
I have taught on the north side of Chicago and the south side of Chicago, and I understand that STEM would work in Oak Park because those kids know that that's how you get into a good college. And then there are other students who want to study technology because it interests them, and they had a teacher who inspired those intangible
you have to be a social person and have those skills as well. But nothing shakes up education like something like Common Core coming from the top and forcing everyone to change what they're doing. So changing the time that school starts, and teachers can't control a lot of, why schools close and we have 50 less elementary schools. But if something came down from the top in a responsibility from educators,
History class or just a econ class for that matter.
That's right on. I couldn't agree more. I think we often don't let our kids have the voice that they are the solutioners. And so in a project-based context, if you took any unit and said, what's the problem here? Whether it was math or history or English, and then let the kids in their groups figure out how to solve that problem. And okay, you have these technology tools to be able to do that. So now you're going to build a solution. So to take some of the creativity, the design thinking, to actually apply it to our curriculum, our standard core, and then build something, like that's hot. And you're not doing it in your computer science class. You're doing it in your math class. You're doing it in your history class. And you just so happen to be learning how to build an app.
We further created the ecosystem of our youth going through these kinds of programs.
Because you guys are doing awesome work at Youth Service Project, and have been for quite a long time. So
Absolutely.
awesome, yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Along the lines of what Dan is doing with open data, is there any effort that you all are aware of just inventorying what's out there and where the gaps are in this ecosystem type concept?
there are a lot of organizations who are trying to do just that, and I think that they're trying to do them at the same time. So we definitely need to bring the spectrum together of all the great problems, or all the great organizations, what they're doing and where they fit on that line. And so I'm excited to hear more about where that is and how that'll come.
Or even just, this concept of having churches have geek squads. I think that's just brilliant. And how do you grow that? Because someone else was saying, we've got to expand the local economy of these opportunities of these kids.
Absolutely.
And it's a great role for even government to do.
There was some talk about competition, and we're competing worldwide. But why do we keep competing? Why don't we just do?
Yeah. All right, so I think we've got the conversation going. We can continue throughout the day. I want to thank you guys for all that you do and for keeping this conversation going. Go data. Right?
Thank you.
Great job, you guys.